can take on it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about something that relates to managing what possible security threats could come in the society. First, I would like to highlight to you what are the possible security threats in a technical way, and then enable you understand the landscape, how people can penetrate into a system. Try and show you some samples of how this can be alleviated in terms of technology intervention and remediation, and then what are the key takeaways and how do we really save the capex and things like that in the long run. Yeah. So what are the security challenges? I think people have been talking about in a layman way in terms of, I'm sorry, I think the screen keeps going around. I think somebody is trying to hack whatever I'm trying to talk maybe, yeah. It's timing. So they are hijacking the traffic. And that come in the form of installation of, like in the Adobe frequent patch releases, they create additional software packages which run in the operating system level as well. They could create a lot of impact. And most of the institutions which have to cater to the compliance management, for some reason they don't follow it and there is a data breach, they have to be extremely careful in and understand the significance of this, because PCI DSS, for one, pertains to all our credit card related transactions, payment card industry and the transactions pertaining to that. One breach, I think people are aware, between Visa and Master, that SWIFT and other companies process, per second it's going to be about 10 to 12 million transactions. So not 12 trillion, I'm sorry, 12 trillion transactions per second. So imagine if someone is able to hack one of the master databases, MasterCard databases, then it's going to be a huge impact on the volume of the commercials that would get impacted, as well as the size of people who would get affected in terms of the customer data. That is very secure, that has to be safe and secure. Then APT, I think we had the prior person talk about it. They target the corporates, advanced institutions and organizations, specifically educational institutions, because these days it's becoming a fashion for people to hack their own servers and then try and say that they have achieved something, but that is something that is happening, and that has to change. Having seen all these challenges, what is that we need to do? What are the operational challenges that we face on our daily basis? One is on the multiple vendors that services for these kind of security, whether it be manual, whether it be information security. It is mandatory for people to understand why and how this data is getting collected. For example, we are applying for a debit card, a credit card and stuff like that, and we are giving Xerox copies of all our credentials back to the bank, right? When we make a signature on the Xerox copy, I would prefer if people write the date in which they have made this Xerox copy and for what reason they have made this Xerox copy. This is very, very important, because this customer data is being collected by someone who is coming into your place because of convenience, and we think it is okay, he's a person reputed and being sent by the bank, but he's a franchisee working for another organization on behalf of the bank. We seldom realize that this data, before it gets into the information system or the technology storage per se, has already been passed on to at least 10 other customers or consumers of this information that you may not be aware. So it is best always to make sure that all these Xerox copies that you provide are at the safe custody, as well as they have a representation for which and the date, So people, if they misuse it, you will get to know when and how this has been transmitted outside, the purview of what you've given it for. So there are lots of these security products that are available, and people are confused as to which one to use, what would be the best solution, and they definitely in the morning, I think we had Ram mention, it is best to have a security analyst, a person who is going to be dedicated, who understands the semantics and the way the organization works, and then how you will be able to position the different products available in the industry suiting to the needs of your organization's security requirements. Yeah. So incident response team, what is this all about? Day in and day out, all our applications, all the kind of solutions that we provide will have users. They have a generic pattern or they have a specific pattern. We will have to record all of these on a regular basis. This is called System Incident Event Management. They call it SIEM. And how is it useful? What happens is when there is an alien coming into the system, which we call as intruder, right? What happens? We tend to understand he will slightly play a low fiddle compared to generic users or the specific users of your system. So this incident management and the team that really keeps looking at all of these incidences will be able to look at and then immediately flag saying that there's something happening which is slightly different from what is been happening in the past or even in the current situation. We have to be cognizant of that, make a note of it and keep following it up, because that could become a possible security breach even after 3 months, even after 3 years. You never know about it. So those kind of event logs are kind of very, very important and relevant in an incident management scenario. User management. Why are users very important? Why authentication is important? Authentication means, are you allowed to use this kind of application? Are you allowed to use this kind of task or a service within my application? These are some things that people will have to clearly demarcate. If people go beyond the boundary, they are not allowed. Period. That should be. It's only a Boolean value. You're either allowed, not allowed. If you really give a little bit of lenience in this kind of scenario, then that is the cause for all the breaches that could happen and the threats would come in place. So how do we really tackle the different forms of the vulnerabilities that could come in terms of the assessment perspective? So we can do an infrastructure assessment, we can do an application-based assessment, we can do a network assessment, database assessment, and then all of these are pertaining to the operations that are built in from each of the layers as security measures, as well as those implementation services that will carve out the normal, the specific, as well as the ad hoc operations that are happening in the system. Spot points. What are spot points? I'm probably getting a little technical here. The reason that I am telling this is all systems, all processes, all manual procedures have these audit controls, right? What are your specific areas that you would focus to say, these are the points where I am likely to see a breach in security? I am likely to face, because I know internally the applications are not foolproof. This will be recorded, but it will be very confidential. Like the way, no one will know when an ATM is shut down for its manual reconciliation procedures and processes in a bank. We will not know. That will be known only to specific people in the bank. And that will run, and offline ATM processing will also happen. Recently, we've also come across a lot of the applications which do end-to-end ATM monitoring. What does it mean? End-to-end ATM monitoring means every transaction that happens, inclusive of the hardware that is put inside an ATM machine, as well as in the venue where the ATMs are positioned, all of these are being tracked. And recently, any transaction that people are complaining or registering complaints saying that I have not been able to withdraw 5,000 rupees, I have been only provided 4,000 rupees. These monitoring tools can immediately flag and raise the incident back to the central banking system of the their own incident response resolution mechanism. So the RBI regulation is you have to resolve this within 24 hours or whatever it is. I'm not sure about the timing, but there is a regulation which says that this has to be resolved immediately. So most of the banks are now going for such kind of systems as well, in terms of monitoring the ATMs, monitoring their assets per se. And if you take, for example, a metro could have lot of these cameras which are working because they would like to identify a criminal against general people who are using the system. And this could also mean someone trying to create a major crime, and during that portion of the crime they would like to monitor all your metro stations, your airports, your railways, whatever it is, your banks, every place, because those are the places typically lot of community activity happens. And in the Internet of Things, the breaches typically happen only if some of those equipments don't function properly or do not relay the data properly. How do the train accidents happen? Only if the data that is being seen visually suddenly collapses for a couple of minutes, and at that time you don't react to the situation having a mirroring facility to provide the data that is relevant, then there could be an accident or a mishap that could happen. All these are interrelated. All these are interrelated, and it is a threat to all of us, and it's a threat to the systems we hold. It is a threat to mankind. How do we solve the problem? We have to keep polling. We have to keep polling the incidents that have happened. We have to have a list of what is called the incidences that we have received, the prior knowledge. All these have to be put in our repository. We have to keep revisiting them again and again. The reason that these things happen and why tools are provided or packages are provided is to ensure all the users are monitored, their patterns are monitored. If there is a suspicious activity in the network because of slowness in the performance of any application or slowness in the performance of any data that is being provided, immediately people will have to raise an alarm. And that alarm happens when we do preventive installation of all the security related software. And whenever we release anything new, people go through all sorts of testing for, identifying the typical ethical hacking measures that we will have to put in place. This includes even the performance engineering and the, whatever I would say, the statement of work compliance saying that I may have 100,000 concurrent users in my ICICI bank account. I may have 300,000 users. The scaling up happens how? The scaling up happens if you are in a cloud, pay per use, right? So it has to dynamically create that environment and make use of the situation. I am slightly getting technical. The reason that I am getting technical is I want people to understand that none of these can be provided without a human intervention, because all these are data that can be collected and provided as variations to what has happened in the past towards what incidences have been occurring currently and what could be possible in future. The human intervention to have the attitude and the appetite to control such things to happen is very, very important and relevant. Because if you really say, oh, okay, this is what has happened, okay, I can handle it. Like the way you said, right, I would like to remain old, in the old fashion of how I develop my systems, there is a possibility that breaches could happen if you update your software. So I did mention about the real-time monitoring. Recently, there have been changes to the way most of the financial institutions, most of the retail organizations, and people who really provide dynamic network are moving towards. What they have is a security operations center and a network operations center. These are real time. These are very, very high real time, because that becomes the backbone of their threat management system, their incident management system. And all of these pertain to all the analytics that happen over the period of years. And if they are going to migrate from one version of software to another version, you can imagine how much time they would take to really migrate, because they need to test in all these areas where potential threats are going to be possible, and that's when the releases happen. I am sure that people are available or aware of, aware of what crowdsourcing and inter-organization crowdsourcing is all about. Crowdsourcing is like grouping yourself. What typically happens is, it could be the way that you operate, it could be the way that the organization perceives that you have to be grouped, it could be also within an organization that you perform a series of actions. So the security systems provide you those facilities to enable the setup so clearly that if any deviation from such kind of options happen, it is really going to flag you out. Again, I put this word compliance monitoring is because I wanted to ensure that people understand all these compliances, rules, and measures are being made so that the privacy of data is retained, and all the related audits and procedures and the documentation are intact, and people are able to access their data with the privileges that they have on time. So, what is the final benefit? Proactive remediation, and then reduction of all your headaches with the customer, with the kind of data that you're handling, with the finances that you will be working with, right? Even if you're running a parking management system, recently we went and met some other places where they're managing the parking. If you have similar handheld devices and you would like to store the data in handheld devices, then the cash tallying at the end of the day, then people will have to connect to a centralized system. Otherwise, the reconciliation becomes hectic, and there is a manual intervention required because all these money collection is done in a manual manner. People go walk, collect the stuff and put it inside the handheld devices. Similar situations are going to be in all the retail environments, all the warehouses where they deal with lot of stock, lot of money, all the banks where day to day the transactions are heavy, all the insurance organizations where customer data, customer related clinical information is important. Life sciences organizations, what happens if we give a blood sample and we are to get back the remedial outcome from, say, a Wockhardt or a, I would say, Pfizer? What they do, they take a blood sample, they take it inside their labs, and then they test it with lots of all the chemical combinations to just then get back to you saying that this is the remedy you have. There are specific diseases for which we don't know the terms even, but only those life sciences organizations can provide. What if there is a corruption in the data, in the blood sample that we have given? Right? All these are human oriented, but nevertheless are monitored. There are cameras which monitor the unusual activity inside the place where this lab work happens. And it really tags it to the unusual and records it and stores it in the incident response system. Lots of things happen. How is the, recently, I went through a video with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where they are monitoring and managing the tags of cars and finding out what are the original tags and what are the duplicate tags that have been fixed in the cars. In a highway or in a street or a road, whatever you would say, using cameras. So people still can implement a lot of these solutions, but what if the camera doesn't work at a specific time? We need to know that, right? That's the prevention. That's the prevention mechanism to identify whether that electronic item is functional or non-functional. And the threat is someone trying to say, I used a duplicate tag, but I was not recognized. And that's not a success, but that's a failure from the person who's implemented the vulnerability detection mechanism. And these are the stuff that would keep coming in, because the technology enhancements and advancements would only create us to find out what are the nuances and loopholes one can take. But we have to be preventing such actions through streamlined operations. And that's how penetration testing, what it does, is to clearly outlay a policy, clearly outlay a compliance mechanism for each of the industries, clearly outlay what needs to be done at specific points in time when there is a breach likely to happen. So backup needs to be taken, backup needs to be taken. If the cameras have to work at this point in time and somebody is entering into their chest, yes, those need to work. Recording needs to be done, recording needs to be done. So these are the measures that one needs to ensure, and that will be tested for simulation during penetration testing. Vulnerability assessment is an ongoing assessment, and that will continue forever for any of the industries that may fall in place. Any questions for me? I think I bored you enough, but anyway, I have taken a topic where if I get in a little bit technical to talk, it may be slightly inconvenient, was my opinion. So I have taken as much as possible the logical way to explain the breaches, the security threats, and how you really would test. There are specific tools which can work across web applications, which can work across mobility applications, which can test whenever in terms of, streamlining the operations and also providing the possible risks whenever you are releasing a package or tool or an application. And this can go in Windows firewall, this can go in your network, this can go in your application, this can go in your specific package as well. All of these need to be handled. I'll leave it there, and we'll let you ask me any questions there. Okay. What happens is, if you have a breach, assume you have a breach, then all your software, everything is gone. That's going to be another incident capex that you will have to incur. No one is going to tell you that if you've lost a license, you've lost a license. And nowadays, Windows, if you buy a laptop, if you change the laptop, you cannot reuse the Windows 10 software or whatever it is, right? It is built into your laptop itself, hardware itself. And similarly, all the other software are built in like that. Operational expenses, yes. Your day-to-day operations are completely gone, and that's going to be a huge burden on us unless we have the backups and the compliance being monitored.
One question, what's the worst case scenario in all this? say you take Sony attack, it was one of the worst. How bad it can get?
It depends on the value. Recently, I heard Equinity paid about 2 billion euros. Yeah. Without realizing that they had to. Equinity. It's a part of, it used to be a part of Barclays. But what happened was one person really twisted the transaction.
The middleman made more money that way.
Yes.
Ensuring that the internet operation is not highlighted about the whole intranet.
Okay.
I don't interface with the security system. Am I minimizing this? So that there is no internet threat to organization.
As long as the initial setup did not have anyone install a botnet or whatever it is, you are safe. Because if you have your rules, your obligations of people using the activities or whatever the applications have to cater to, and even emails that they use, you don't have an external interface coming in. Intranet is fine, but you also have other devices, right, like your pen drives and stuff like that. If those are all very secure, then you won't have any problem. What typically is happening in organizations, say a large organization which manages credit cards and stuff like that, and if we are a part of that industry working from offshore, they create a separate unit. And that unit will have only virtual desktop interface. And all the servers will be somewhere else. And we will not be even allowed to send emails outside that network. When you mean intranet, pure, it's only intranet. It can only be within the same network, and you have to have emails on the first, that particular organization's network names only. You can't send any email, you can't use your pen drive, you can't use any external devices, because that's a remote desktop for you. And you can't even carry any of your mobile phones, wallets, everything will be kept outside. I have serviced such organizations, and they will have tons of people doing the help desk, incident management, infrastructure management, all that, but they will have limited access to certain areas, which is, again, the policies are very clear. Attachment of files, everything will be looked into. You will not be provided software even for access. Some people may not be even provided Word, spreadsheets. They will only be provided access to an application to just enter data and then finish the work and come out. It's all well manned, right? Everything is recorded for 7 months or 9 months. They have a pattern. Yeah, we are very minimized to that extent, but nevertheless, you will have to look at where their infrastructure resides. If that is penetratable, then you can't stop it. Yes. 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 It is highly secure that way. Any additional questions?
Nowadays, hardwares are more vulnerable as well.
See, hardware, how do they become vulnerable? Only when you can work on with the software. Independent electronic items are hardware unless you can work on them with a software or some kind of programming techniques. They are not going to change. Even in the morning videos, if you see, someone has to operate on your, somewhere you need to have a connectivity, somewhere you need to have a software or a program go inside. Unless that access is provided, hardware is just like a dead rat, right? You have a telephone system, unless you connect that to a jack, either from Airtel or BSNL or otherwise, it doesn't work. You can only break it. You can take a hammer and break it, right? Am I telling, did it answer your question?
I take your answer. However, there are certain areas, for example, there are many hardwares which are easily accessible to the public, right? For example, nowadays IoTs are coming up, and you are going to have so many devices connected to your router or to your Wi-Fi item, okay? So, and in such a case, if it is hookable, it can be easily programmed or it can be easily malfunctioned.
I know, but as long as you don't provide the access to those IoTs.
I got point.
Yes.
Got your point.
Even if there are, right, I may have a Wi-Fi router set up from my mobile phone and give you access, right? But I can restrict the access. I can say only from this mobile phone. And that needs to be programmed. Anyway, you need to write a program to say it's only from the mobile phone. If not with a password where you can have WPA or whatever, PSK, whatever, kind of, algorithms.
Got to learn many new things from you.
Huh? Yeah, sure. Any other questions for me? Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. I'm sorry, one more thing was that I had sent them a couple of slide options. The second slide option had a lot of images to demonstrate what exactly would an environment mean and all that. I'll probably tell them to launch that and then make you see so that it becomes easy for you to understand too much of text that was there in my presentation. Yeah, sorry about that.